Welcome to the Police Accountability Report on the Real News Network. My name is Taya, and along with my co-host Stephen Janis, we want to remind you that this show has a single purpose: to hold the politically powerful institution of policing accountable. To do so, we don't just report on stories of police brutality, but we delve into the politics that make it possible. And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us, and we might be able to investigate. Please reach out to us either in the comments or message us at the Police Accountability Report on Facebook, or message us at Eyes on Police on Twitter. And of course, you can message me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Twitter or Facebook. And we do have a private email, par@therealnews.com, where you can email us. And I want you to know I do read your comments and appreciate them. And when I say that you need to think about the politics of policing, I want you just to think for 1 second. In what type of society would a routine encounter with a public official, which turned deadly, be acceptable? How warped does the government have to be to condone a traffic stop that ends with the death of an innocent person? What sort of thirst for violence does the political power structure have to make the act of riding a bike without a light a death sentence? This is a fundamental question we have to answer if we really want to hold police accountable. Stephen, how disproportionate are the police-involved killings that we're seeing?
Well, there was an excellent article by The Guardian in UK which compared killings by police in the United States of America versus other countries. And it showed some very revealing statistics. Like, for instance, in England, Wales, there have been 55 police killings in 24 years. And in the US, there were 59 police killings in 24 days.
Wow.
Or in Australia, since 1992, 94 people have been killed by police. In the U.S., in a single month, in March of 2015, there were 97 people killed by police. The statistics go on and on, but the point is that we have this disproportionate police violence in this country. Other countries don't tolerate it. Other political structures don't tolerate it. They would, if you just kept a couple of our police killings where someone had a routine traffic stop and they ended up dead, it would be intolerable. But here, for some reason, it's justified. And I think we'll get into that later on in the show, but that's the main issue.
So it makes me wonder, is part of this an economic issue, or are we looking more at a racial issue here?
Well,
or is it both?
It's both, because I think, if you look, it's mostly poor communities where this happens, but especially in African-American communities. And of course, African-American men who unarmed men are one of the highest groups of disproportionate police violence in this country. So it's both, policing, urban policing, especially in African-American neighborhoods, is especially violent, as we report on this show. But it also affects, people who are economically disadvantaged in general, regardless of race. So it's both.
Absolutely. And I think the last person that we spoke with, Nick Pettit, is an excellent example of that.
Right.
He stood up for a young African-American man who was being abused by police. And because he had the audacity to assert his constitutional rights while standing on his own front porch, he was the next victim.
Right.
So it seems like race is one of the first targets, but then it spreads into a class attack.
Yeah, I think the police check off the boxes. You know, can I do this to this person? Well, are they poor? Yes. Are they in lower class? Yes. Are they African-American? Yes. We always had this, thought in newsrooms in Baltimore when we would cover police brutality. We had the Roland Park principle. It's one of the richest neighborhoods in the city.
Yes.
And we always say, would they do this in Roland Park? And the answer was, of course, no. But they will do it in West Baltimore. And the Department of Justice investigation into unconstitutional racist policing in Baltimore showed that 80% of the most aggressive enforcement occurred in two predominantly black neighborhoods in the city.
And when we say predominantly black, we mean like 96% black.
Right, and poor as well. So, I think they got to check off the boxes, but all that makes this possible.
But as always on the Police Accountability Report, we are going to show, not just tell. And to do so, we're going to turn to videos of encounters with police that speak directly to the disproportionate power given to police and what that says about our own political agency. The first example is a video shared with us by a viewer from Richardson, Texas. It depicts the arrest of a man whose identity we are shielding to protect him from retaliation. Police had pulled over the driver and passenger for failing to signal. But the stop soon escalates, and the reason the process gets tense is highly illustrative, because without evidence, probable cause, or justification, police begin to initiate the arrest when the passenger makes a simple declaration. He invokes his constitutional rights.
Sir, I need you to step out here for me.
For what?
Because I'm going to walk a dog around your car.
Okay, you have. Okay. Why are you doing that?
Okay, you're required to step out of the
Nah,
car.
I'm not required.
Okay, sir.
Sir, you just opened my door illegally.
No, you need
Sir,
to step out of the
am I right or
car,
am I
or
wrong,
you're
or-
going to go to jail for interfering.
How am I interfering?
Okay, you're not doing what I tell you. The courts have ruled that I can remove you from the car anytime I want.
Okay, but have you even told me that?
1:30.
Illegal
Okay.
detainment.
Illegal detainment.
Correction, one more.
Go ahead.
Step
Do you
out of
want
the
me?
vehicle.
Do you want me to? Are you gonna arrest me?
No,
Take me out. You
I'm
take
telling
me
you to
out.
step out of the
No,
vehicle.
you take me out. Let's go. Go ahead.
Step
I'm
out
not
of the
doing
vehicle.
anything wrong. I've been to school here, Richardson. I
Okay,
know
are
all of you
refusing
guys.
to get out of the vehicle.
Sir, I'm not getting out. This is my personal vehicle.
Okay.
Why will allow you to go into my vehicle if you haven't done anything wrong?
Why are you doing this?
Sir, I work right here. I'm going to throw this in the trash,
The
sir.
gentleman's refusing to exit the vehicle, so we're
Officer.
going to remove him and we're going to arrest him for interfering.
Officer,
Get out,
hold
Carlos.
on. Give me a second. Okay, let me put this right here. I'm not resisting. I swear.
You have
I'm not-
refused multiple times. You're under arrest for interfering. Stand behind you.
Sir, can I speak?
You're right. We don't. You could have cooperated with me. You have your weapons on you?
So, Stephen, what is happening here in this video? To me, this is absolutely astonishing the way they're trampling on this person's personal rights.
Well, it's really interesting because what you see in here is sort of the rhetorical authority of police in the sense that if you invoke your constitutional rights, you're somehow challenging the overarching political authority of police, right? In this police officer's mind, and I think this is illustrative, as you said, of the mentality of policing in this country that we've constructed through our political economy, invoking your rights is somehow an affront. Okay, an affront to the power structure. And that's the whole point. And what that shows you is what the whole point is. The point is to limit our political efficacy and limit our ability to ask for rights. And of course, as we talked about before, the economic power structure, it's also part and part making people poor, right? The whole imbalance that we've created with wealth in this country, the wealth inequality, can only be maintained through barriers. And those barriers, I think, are enforced by police. And if poor communities or people who are less advantaged start saying, hey, I have a right, there should be some equity in this society, that's problematic for, I'm not going to say the elites, but the political, the neoliberal power structure that holds most of the wealth. And I think you see there, in that very small microcosm, that conflict. I want to invoke my rights, and the officer's like, oh, really? You're going to be arrested.
I can't tell you how many videos I've seen of someone being pulled over, and when the person has the audacity to bring up that their constitutional rights might be violated, that's immediately when the arrest gets out of hand, as if they don't even have the right to say, I'm a human being, I'm an American citizen, I have a certain set of rights. It seems as if the police officers consider it a direct challenge to their authority that the citizen knows the law.
Yeah, you can't say I can't consent to a search in Baltimore City. In fact, that was proven in the Justice Department report. When people the number one thing they did was when people tried to protest or film them or whatever, they would automatically move to arrest. And that's what we saw actually in Nick Pettit's case, right? He was filming police. That is completely First Amendment protected, constitutional.
Protected speech.
You can't arrest someone for that.
On his own porch, no less.
On his own porch, his own property. And yet they felt they had the right, and they haven't backed down on that. We tried to reach out. On our last show, we showed Nick Pettit, who got arrested. We reached out to the city attorney and the Columbus, Ohio attorney, and they just haven't gotten back to us. I think they're still going forward with that case.
So as we can see, the police remove the passenger and arrest him, and now he's facing charges for literally doing nothing but riding in the passenger seat. His freedom and his future is compromised because he invoked his rights, which raises a question. Why would a simple invoking of constitutional rights prompt police to escalate? And what made police pull them over in the first place?
Yeah.
So, Stephen, what do you think? And has the Richardson Police Department given us any sort of comment or any sort of feedback?
Well, this is critical. One thing about police accountability is we have a video, and we have a video that shows a sequence of events. I can only imagine what used to happen before we didn't have videos.
Right.
So this morning, I called several members of the Richardson Police Department who are supposed to answer questions from the public and the media, and I told them we had this video and that we would like comment, and we are willing to share the video with them so they can give us like a step-by-step of why this arrest was justified. We have not yet heard back, but I promise you I will continue to call them. And if we hear back from them eventually, we will re-report it on this show so people know what they have to say. As of now, the best I can say is no comment from them, but we will continue to follow up.
Absolutely. But the idea of escalation seems to be what's driving American policing, and no case seems to exemplify this issue more than the death of a man at the hands of Las Vegas police. Byron Lee Williams was riding his bike at 6 a.m. on September 5th when police tried to stop him for riding without a safety light. For reasons that have still yet to be made clear, police chased him, and then this, all caught on body cam.
Get on the ground! You still got more time. Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get your hand out of there.
Okay. Yeah.
Put your hands behind your back.
Okay. Oh.
Give me your other hand. Give me your other hand. Give me your other fucking hand, dude.
Right. I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
Get cuffs. I got his hands. Get cuffs.
I'm doing it.
Get cuffs.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Yeah, because you're fucking tired of running.
Okay, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Can't breathe.
One BC 71, code 4, lift the red, 1 in custody.
Can't breathe. I can't breathe. Can't breathe. I can't breathe. Can't breathe. I can't breathe.
As you can see, Williams told the officers he could not breathe, a plea for help that they ignored. They also joked while he suffered, as you can hear from the footage. Then, inexplicably, all 7 officers on the scene turn off their body cameras. Since then, the police have actually justified the arrest, but none of the mainstream media asked the critical question that we posed at the beginning of the show. Why? Why did the police need to chase a man without a safety light on his bike? Did it pose a public danger? Was it a grievous enough crime to warrant the use of deadly force? And just as importantly, how could all 7 police officers have their body cameras go off at the exact time for the exact length of time? That also is highly suspect. Stephen, why does this happen? How could this even happen?
Well, you know, there's a critical aspect to policing which doesn't get examined that you talked about before. And I noticed when I reviewed the media accounts of this, there was never the question, as you said, why did police chase him? If you watch the body camera video, it's pretty clear that this officer goes in this insane chase. He drives after him with his car. He's yelling at him, cursing at him, then jumps over a wall, runs through a back alley, and then 7 cops show up for a guy without a bike light. All that tells you there's something else going on here other than law enforcement. Because you got to look at it. Let's look at a very simple and logical philosophical criteria. What exactly was the threat to the public safety of a man running a bike at 6 in the morning with a light? There's none that I can see. And yet police were so absolutely set upon detaining and arresting this man. That tells you there's something else going on here. And the second thing that is important to note, if you watch the media accounts, suddenly it came out that he was a drug addict, that he had past arrests. You know, the whole continuum of the law enforcement rhetorical tool of sullying this man's reputation to
dragging out a narrative so that the victim somehow deserves what happens to them.
It's always, you know, they don't even have to say it, you know, but it's implied. Well, wait a second, he has a previous arrest, so we had to chase him, we had to kill him. I mean, it totally speaks to it and shows there is some other imperative driving policing other than the safety of the people in the community, and especially when it ends with someone dying, and then the police department says, oh, by the way, this man had a criminal record.
And how many police officers were chasing this man on a bike? 6, 7 officers, right?
Initially, it was just one.
Initially, it was
very
one,
determined police officer.
But it ended
then
up
6
being
or 7
6 or
cops
7
show up.
officers joined in because the man didn't have a reflecting marker on his bicycle.
Exactly.
It seems a bit heavy-handed for the policing.
It's quite rational for an African-American man in this country to run from police, given the history of policing and all the men that have died in absolutely non-emergency situations.
Yes.
You know, as a case we reported on Anton Black, who was supposed to be kidnapping someone who got chased home and died. It just goes on and on. So I think it's perfectly reasonable. And they have never come up with a reason, and no one has asked them. None of the media I looked at said, hey, why is this so important? That's always a given. The police in any situation have a right to detain us, no matter what. I mean, what does that tell you? That there's no presumption upon them. Supposedly the Constitution is structured that the police have to have justified, probable cause.
Right.
Probable cause doesn't matter in American policing.
Well, isn't there also supposed to be something called officer's discretion, where an officer can look at a scenario and say, you know what, maybe the full brunt of my authority doesn't need to be used here.
Well,
Maybe
sure,
I can just wave this one off or give them a verbal warning or citation.
Well,
Maybe the officer could have just said, hey, put a reflector on and let it go at that.
Of course, officers have discretion. They don't have to enforce every law, and they can make that decision. You're absolutely right. But they also have to justify detainment, legally via the Constitution. And they didn't do that here. But yeah, he could have just driven past him. What made him decide that he had to go through this, cops-like chase, referring to the show?
TV show, yeah.
I have no idea. And the police department has not commented, but no one asked. So they don't ever have to justify it.
I think both arrests we have highlighted in this show point to the same problem: how our political leaders have conferred our rights to the police. In a constitutional democracy, we have the right to invoke them. In a free society, we should be able to ride a bike without consenting to be stopped by the police. In fact, we have a right to demand that police take extraordinary measures to avoid using force. And when they do, they better have a justifiable reason for their actions. But based upon the arrests we have reported on in this segment, it would not be unreasonable to conclude that equitable government for and by the people is in real jeopardy, that the power of policing has eroded the freedom that we are all supposed to espouse and enjoy. In fact, it seems that the aggressive law enforcement and basic principles of a democratic society are incompatible. I'm going to quote from the father of modern policing. His name was Sir Robert Peel. He was a British prime minister who created policing to protect private property, namely his family's textile mills. But the public was opposed. People were fearful policing would become a tool of the elites and generally harass the less advantaged. To allay those concerns, he created what's known as the Peelian principles, which he promised would govern policing and limit the power of cops. And one of those principles is what I will end with today, and perhaps an idea that needs to be applied to modern-day policing. He said the ultimate measure of the success of law enforcement was not the presence of police, but the absence of crime. In other words, good cops solve problems, not create them. And effective policing works for the community, not lord over it. It's a good principle to invoke in light of why and how policing is prosecuted today. I would like to thank my co-host, investigative reporter Stephen Janis, for joining me today. And for those of you watching like these viewers did, Noli D, Blind Justice, Nick Pettick, this is your power, the power of those of you who are waiting to reach out to us, and then we can use and share your story. We can do this when you don't know if you can trust your local law enforcement. You can reach out to independent media like us. So together, we can try to apply the pressure needed to change the criminal behavior of officers. And we can't do it without you. So if you do have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us, and we might be able to investigate like we did for Nick and Noli and Blind Justice. Please reach out to us either in the comments or message us at Police Accountability Report on Facebook or at Eyes on Police on Twitter, or you can email us privately at par@therealnews.com. And of course, you can message me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Twitter or Facebook. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does make a difference and help keep the show alive. My name is Taya Graham, and I want to thank you for joining me for the Police Accountability Report.